Strange things are indeed happening, my friends. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. We're seeing some rather curious things with regards to planes and people going on vacation of recent. We have a number of clips that are now coming out with regards to that. Some rather curious things occurring. So, of course, what's interesting about it is a lot of people are seeing more and more of these crashes with planes. We're seeing planes have technical difficulties. Check this out. Here's a clip right here that kind of spells this out a little bit.
You cannot take your bags with you. You can't take that. You have to leave it right here.
You can't make it up. Just had to evacuate the plane because the tire blew as we took.
So the first one there, the engine blew up, and the second one, the tire did. And these are things from the last couple days. This isn't even accounting the most recent one, which of course was today as well. Actually, let me play into that as well. I think we can get into that right here.
Took off.
All right, you can see it right there. This is from today. Oh my goodness, every day there's more. Apparently ran into this plane when it landed and cut right through its tail on the other plane, as you can see there. So of course, these are not actually showing up very easily in the news. I noticed that when I did some searches on the internet, just Google. So you go to Google and you just type in plane crashes 2025, and all you get is, and actually there's a new one. Oh my goodness, is this a new one? Oh my, dude, there's literally a new one since I started making the video. 30 minutes ago. Oh no, okay, I didn't see this one. So this was from 7 hours ago, maybe. Yeah, I think it's the same one. I didn't even see this. Oh my goodness. Here's another one. I was too busy looking at all these ones on X and other places on YouTube, all these videos they were posting. And now we got another one today. Here's a second one for today. What in the world? Two, of course, no longer with us as small plane crashes into bus in Sao Paulo. Actually, so this is really interesting. So we had the one, what was it? Korean Airlines. Where was that? It was over here. Is this Korean Airlines? I think it is a Korean Airlines. And I'm not sure what that one is. That happened. Then you have this Sao Paulo, Brazil, with a small plane. And of course, it does come back to a couple things. You have Boeing. You remember you had that engineer, and I used to be a mechanical engineer myself. I used to work at a semi-truck company designing semi-trucks, but there was an engineer at Boeing that came out some years ago, a couple of years ago, saying that they were using cheap parts for some of the builds on these planes. And now we're seeing the results of that. In some of these cases, it could be a result of them cutting corners, using cheaper parts while building these planes, and now they're failing. That could be a part of it. That could be one part of it. But I think there's more to it because it seems a little too strange. Because, for example, the engines are not the same. So, like, the engine would be, again, at least with car companies and semi-truck companies, this is the case. I'm not quite sure with airplanes. But usually with cars and semi-trucks, the engine's often built by another company. It's its own assembly built by another entire company and brought into the vehicle, right? And so, like, for example, Cummins, that's an example of an engine company. So I don't know in the case of these, because we saw a jet engine fail, right? And when the engineer was talking about parts, he was referring mainly to the body of these planes. So that's something separate. So it is kind of weird. But we also have other strange things. Yeah, so this was an example of this. Sao Paulo plane runs into a bus, right? Busy Sao Paulo street. And of course, we have far more than that. So we had one in Alaska. We had one in D.C. We had one in, I'm losing track here. Was it Philadelphia? And oh my goodness, there's so many of them. Where was it? So Santa Barbara. Yeah, so this is Alaska. Let's see here. So we got Alaska here. We have, of course, I think this is the one that was in D.C. because that was the big story everybody was talking about. Then we have this here, my friends, Blackhawk helicopter Shocking aviation blunder moments before crashing into plane in DC. Of course, this is the DC crash about 4 or 5 days ago now. We have here, of course, a number of updates about this. Apparently, they're flying 100 feet above where it was meant to be flying. And we also have that they were on a routine training exercise, flying at 100 or 300 feet, but the maximum altitude permitted was 200 feet. So that was clearly in an error. We have, of course, a number of other things as well that don't make sense with regards to the story. We have them were likely the crew of the Blackhawk helicopter wearing night vision goggles at the time that this occurred. The crew of the Army Blackhawk helicopter were likely wearing night vision goggles at the time it went down, according to investigators, was performing a routine training mission in an effort to renew 28-year-old Captain Rebecca Lubbock's annual certification when it crashed into American Airlines Flight 5342 while making its final descent at Reagan National Airport. Investigators probing the crash have been focused on whether the soldiers on board were wearing the nighttime visual aid when the collision, of course, took place. The head of the National Transportation Safety Board confirmed on Thursday that the crew was likely adhering to the expected safety guidelines for the goggles. We do believe, given the mission, given what they were heard or not heard, CVR, cockpit voice recorder, that they were likely wearing night vision goggles. So, of course, they were wearing these at the time this occurred. And the actual big story is right here. This is the thing that looks very bizarre. Army Blackhawk and DC plane crash had turned off electronic location system. It was involved, of course, the Army Blackhawk helicopter involved, of course, in the collision last week had an advanced tracking system turned off at the time of the incident. According to Senator Cruz, the congressman on Thursday told reporters Blackhawk helicopter's automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, ADS-B, which is permitted for military aircraft, was not active when it collided over the Potomac River. This was a training mission, so there were no compelling national security reason for ADS-B to be turned off, Cruz said after sitting in a briefing. So it's supposed to be something that was on. There's no reason for it to be off. Why did they have it turned off? Why were they flying over 100 feet higher than they were supposed to be? This is the question people are asking. An advanced surveillance technology that combines aircraft's positioning source, avionics, and ground infrastructure to create an accurate surveillance interface between the aircraft and air traffic control. Although Blackhawk had a transponder to appear on radar, ADS-B is significantly more accurate. So they had it off. So there's a number of things that don't make sense. They were wearing night vision goggles at the time this occurred. They were flying over 100 feet higher than they were supposed to. And also on top of that, they had their advanced positioning technology turned off when it should automatically be on. So it makes it look very, very strange why all this was occurring. And this was, of course, an annual test flight for this lady to make sure she could still maintain her ability of flying at any rate. So there's a lot of that right there. It makes no sense. There's this solar storm that is coming. And actually, I wanted to get into that as well, because I've been talking about how we've went from one age to a new age, right? I've talked about this on my channel for the last several months. And there was something that happened around 536 AD, shortly after it went from one Ona, 500-year Ona, to another 500-year Ona. And this is something that commonly happens. And I'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but it actually relates perfectly with this right here. So we'll get into that in a minute. So then we have this here. We have here a recording. And like I said, we're going to get into all this. First of all, I'm going to mention food supply, 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. 4 weeks worth for $197. You're going to definitely want to get that. If you have not already, you never know what's next, my friends. Link is in the description. It's always wise to be prepared for anything. This book here, The Lost Ways, How Your Great-Great-Grandfather Lived Without Electricity, considering the fact that we could have this solar storm coming up very soon here, it might be wise to have it just in case. You never know if you may not have electricity for a couple weeks or whatever might happen. It's wise to have it beforehand because you're not going to be able to buy it after the fact. You're not going to be able to buy it at Walmart or some store near you unless you got some sort of weird survival store near you. Maybe you'll buy it then. But I'm about one of the only people selling it here. I am one of the only people selling it on YouTube. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody else selling it. The Lost Ways, $37. Get the printed version. Link is in the description. At any rate, let's get back to the video. So we have, of course, a lot of strange things happening. I didn't even show you this. Check this out. A river in Argentina has turned blood red, sparking, of course, concern among the locals. Residents woke up to a strong, unpleasant odor coming from the water. Authorities are now collecting samples. And this thing is long. This entire river is red. Okay? I think they show up from a large... Look at that. Even into the... Oh my goodness, look at that. Check that out. So there's another one over here too. It just keeps going and going. Where did this come from, right? Amazing. Entire thing is completely red. Now, we've seen red rivers before. I think it's pretty rare. You see it like every 5 years or so. You see something like this. I've covered it at least 2 times in the past. I've been on YouTube for 15 years. But I haven't seen one this long. This is really ridiculous. This thing is extremely long, entirely red. Whatever this is, it's really a lot of whatever's in it. And of course, you have this passage from Revelation. The third angel poured out its bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood red. Revelation 16:4. So the question, and of course it stinks, so that's another really bizarre factor to it as well. Could this have something to do with the time we are living in? Could this be, of course, a sign? And this is what I was trying to get at a minute ago with regards to this next big solar storm they're talking about. This was published on January 20th of this year. Next big solar storm could plunge the world into darkness. Solar storms have attracted curiosity for centuries. People often admire the bright colors they cause in the sky, but they rarely suspect that these same solar events can bring widespread outages that force industries to a grinding halt. Many experts say the risk may be rising because our world depends more and more on advanced technology. So it's talking about potential of a huge solar storm. And of course, I can't even read this guy's name. Kestutis Ikamis from Vilnius. Obviously, this is probably not American. Vilnius University points out serious vulnerabilities in places with large power networks, such as the United States and Canada. This also kind of is when they tell you, oh, something might happen soon. A strong geomagnetic storm could incapacitate vital systems such as electricity, water supply, telecommunications. Of course, we've been talking about this for years on various videos in the past. I've talked about these vulnerabilities in our electrical framework in our country. We had that outage over there in Washington State near, I'm trying to remember the city. Come on, brain's not working. It was in Tacoma. It was in the northern part of Washington State, about 30 miles from Canada. And of course, at that exact same time that these 4 power substations got, of course, hacked, China had some of their finest being trained 30 miles north of there. So could that be related? I kind of wonder. We've also been hearing a lot about, of course, China. That's another factor. You also have this weird weather and things of that nature. There's a lot of factors to all this. But what I wanted to point out is there was a very interesting thing that happened in 536 AD. According to historical consensus, 536 AD is widely considered the worst year to be alive in human history, primarily due to the massive volcanic eruption that plunged northern hemisphere into a prolonged volcanic winter, causing widespread famine and darkness for nearly 18 months. Now, of course, this was shortly after it went from, if you've been following me, I've talked about the red dragon versus the white dragon, and if you haven't followed me, you won't know what I'm talking about. But there's a very famous festival in Egypt where the phoenix, would come back every 500 years. It has a 500-year lifespan. It would come back to a certain place in Egypt, and it would indicate that it's a start of a new 500-year Ona. And it was considered prophetic among all ancient cultures. And what's really interesting is they've also tied this into something that's in the Book of Esther, in the final chapter of the Book of Esther, something that was removed from the Book of Esther and put in the Apocrypha called Mordecai's Dream. I've talked about this before, where it shows two dragons fighting in the heavens, vying, of course, for power over the world for the next 500 years. And I've talked about how you can actually see how it was laid out. So 1000 BC to 500 BC was the red dragon's time frame, red dragon being a bad dragon. 500 BC to 0 AD was the white dragon, which was a good time, and that was during the time when Esther saved Israel, right when it turned to the white dragon's time. Then you have 0 AD to 500 AD. It says in the New Testament, in Scripture, it says this was the age... no, it didn't say it that way. It says the God of this world, but actually the word world is age. The God of this age, it was referring to the devil, was during the time of the NT, which was 0 AD to 500 AD, and that is the time of the red dragon. So even Scripture confirms this by saying this is the when it says the God of this age, it's referring to the red dragon. Then you have the Middle Ages, 500 AD to 1500 AD. That was two white dragons. Now, again, getting over to what happened here at 536 AD, this was the turn from the red to the white dragon time frame. This was the time from around about the time of King Arthur and Merlin. King Arthur had a dream about two dragons fighting, a red and white dragon, and the white dragon won. Now, of course, shortly after that, they had this massive volcanic winter. So what I realized from this is when you go from one to the other, you can have huge upheaval. It can even be in the weather. It can be in whatever, society. Because these two dragons are fighting, vying for power, they cause a lot of chaos. And interestingly, we're seeing all the strange things happening now. Could this be related when we're talking about this big solar storm? Could there be something big coming that we're not aware of like this? I don't know. That's the question. And of course, here is the diagram I was showing you where 2024, actually it's celestial season, perfectly matched the time of Esther, 480 BC, when they had the exact same celestial season. This was the time of the story of Esther, where she had saved Israel in the next 500 years, was under the white dragon. We also went from the red to the white dragon in 2024. That's why you're seeing all these changes this year with our new presidency. So you can see here, when you look at this, all these solar eclipses were on the same day. There is one day that looks a little different, but again, they had a lunar calendar. We have a solar calendar today, so that might be where the discrepancy is in how you calculate a day. Lunar goes from the middle of the day to the middle of the day, not the end of the day to the end of the day like we do. So there's a factor there. But we can also see these changes happening around us in real time. Currently, you can see a lot of big changes in the last couple weeks alone. You're seeing companies like McDonald's dropping some of the things that they were promoting that seem to be in the realm of DEI. We're talking about scholarships. They've changed how they're doing those. With regards to McDonald's, you have, of course, a lot of other companies dropping this as well. Even Google dropping some of this. You have, of course, Hollywood being completely turned on at this point. Here's a perfect example. This is Rachel Zegler in an interview talking about her Snow White role. Check this out. And it's kind of interesting because you'll see what I'm getting at after this. I'm going to show you something unbelievable.
That is not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
And sometimes even the critics themselves.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
And I'm also saying I don't hate white dudes.
So, of course, this was kind of the mentality not even a year or two ago with some of these people. Rachel Zegler, of course, being in this new movie coming out called Snow White. What's really interesting about this is that the movie has a trailer here on YouTube that has 1 million thumbs down, 40,000 thumbs up, 1 million thumbs down. Clearly, America is rejecting this message now. Because, of course, the Snow White movie was the original storyline was about a princess saving Snow White. And now apparently they want to make it, no, it's the exact opposite. She's the one that's saving, and she's in power. She's, this whole Femi type of power stuff, basically. And people are rejecting this message now. Matter of fact, even Brie Larson herself is now walking back a lot of stuff. She refuses to criticize her own male followers. She refuses to do the criticism that she used to do. She's all about realizing, wait a second, I'm not getting any more parts in movies. I can't talk this way anymore. And maybe she's going to completely change who she is. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But the fact is, you're seeing, even in Hollywood, things changing quickly. You have the USAID, of course, where the Doge team is looking into how they're doing spending. And they discovered a ridiculous amount of corruption. Ridiculous things that things were being spent on. Absolutely unbelievable. Actually, some of the more interesting ones, let me show you. I had this one back here. It's pretty interesting. Where is it at? All right, here it is. Yeah, and they're going to go into the Pentagon next, by the way. So I'm going to show you how ridiculously big this is going to be. This is barely the tip of the iceberg. You'll see what I'm getting at. So check this out. USAID, tax dollars subsidized mainstream outlets. You have Politico, New York Times, Associated Press, Reuters, and BBC, and maybe even other ones. So they were literally taking your tax dollars, which you're forced to pay, giving it to these organizations, which then you're forced to watch. That's how they were doing it. No joke. And of course, on top of that, they had the most ridiculous other charges in there as well. Like $20 million for a Sesame Street show in Iraq. I mean, really? So they just had all your tax dollars going to ridiculous stuff in other countries. $8 million for tourism in Egypt, or no, $6 million. Okay. How about $2.5 million to promote inclusion in Vietnam? Seriously? So this is the kind of stuff they're spending money on. But guess what's next? And you also had this guy. He was getting some of the money from there. Billy Boy, the computer guy. And Chelsea, I think you know which one I'm referring to, was getting some money from this. But on top of that, even Africans. So this whole thing, the USAID was supposed to be about helping those that are underprivileged in foreign countries that need help, right? For example, some of the countries in Africa. We have Africans on X putting out videos saying, shut the whole thing down. We're not getting any of the money from this. It's all going to other people. And matter of fact, we have this one from Nigeria. It was supposed to be 3.2 or 3 million to Nigeria. It ended up going to some guy in Maryland instead. So you wonder how some of these representatives with a $150,000 a year wage are somehow, worth $50 million after 10 years. I wonder why. So then you have all that. So then on top of that, what's really interesting is that this is only 2% of the money that's being spent in our GOV. They haven't even went through 2% of the money. They're going to go through another 98% potentially. Doge. And cut things that are ridiculously wasteful, right? So just to give you an idea, here is an example. You have the Office of Personnel Management or the Department of Commerce. They are about equivalent to the USAID in funding. Okay? That one's about double. Department of Veteran Affairs. So imagine the next thing they're going to go through, according to what they've been saying, they're going to be going through, I got it around here somewhere. Where did it go? Here it is. They're going to be going through next the Pentagon. So the Pentagon is next. And that's part of the Department of Defense, which is about this size. Almost tenfold the size. So the Department of Defense is about $470 billion. So they're just barely getting started. You haven't seen nothing yet. The rest of the entire year is going to be a crazy train, okay, of all this stuff. At any rate, so you get the idea. So we have all these stories. I'm just kind of wondering what some of you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.